Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the great state of Colorado. We are here, and this will be broadcast to our friends back east for the annual CPAC conference. I'm Stephen Tubbs with 710 KNUS in Denver. This is the marijuana debate. Before we begin, I would like to thank you here in Colorado and for those of you watching back east, and a particular welcome to our great United States veterans who are here in this room and also in the CPAC conference back east. Thank you for your service. I'll get to the format in just a moment, but first we have two panelists. They will be debating each other for the next 30 minutes. And what we'll do is start with brief introductions, and then I'll give you the format, and then we will begin. So, Jeff, if you want to begin.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Hunt. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy here at Colorado Christian University, and I direct our think tank, the Centennial Institute.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Anglin. I'm the founder and president of Americana, a cannabis confections company, and the founder and chairman of the board of the Colorado Cannabis Chamber of Commerce.
Gentlemen, thank you and welcome. And again, thank you to Colorado Christian University for hosting today. We'll have opening remarks with both of our panelists, and they will have 4 minutes each. We will keep to a strict time limit. You may hear me say time, and that is not to be rude to our two guests, but we want to keep on time. 4-minute openings, then we'll talk about the questions and answers with each having a maximum 2-minute answer, and there will be time for rebuttal. We will close it out with 2 minutes of closing remarks. So we'll start, Jeff, if you would like to defer to your guest here, we'll start with Dan and his opening. 4 minutes begins now.
Thank you. Hello, Colorado Christian University CPAC, fellow conservatives and cannabis colleagues. My name is Dan Anglin. Like most of you, I'm a conservative and lifelong Republican voter. I'm also the son of a Baptist minister, a Christian, a Marine Corps veteran of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, a husband, father, employer, and I just happen to make the best cannabis gummies in the world. When Amendment 64 passed, I was working in politics at the state capitol in Denver and had no plans to get involved. But I voted to legalize recreational cannabis because I'm a conservative, and I have been a cannabis consumer almost my entire adult life. And while I wanted the freedom that Amendment 64 offered, and as a political advocate, I couldn't wait to see Colorado exercise its 10th Amendment right. I tell you who I am because my opponent is going to take every moment of this debate to dehumanize me, my colleagues, my friends, and other hardworking Coloradans as three-piece suit scammers trying to line our pockets with millions while we try to get people hooked on our products. Simply not true. I will not allow for my identity to be taken from me, and I'd urge you to do the same. Join me today as a lifelong conservative who loves liberty and the Constitution, and let's openly talk about why legalizing cannabis sales for adults was the best decisions that voters made in the 21st century here in the state of Colorado. I'm going to keep this incredibly simple. We're here for two reasons today. One, to establish why we as conservatives should embrace the legal licensed cannabis industry as good for Coloradans, Americans' liberty and freedom. And two, to fully dispel the myths, dare I say fake news, that my opponents use as scare tactics masquerading as conservatives to propagandize for anti-freedom, anti-states' rights policies. Freedom-loving Coloradans took on a brilliant states' rights American experiment when they voted in legal cannabis and ratified it in our state constitution in 2012. Since then, in just a few short years, in both Colorado and throughout the United States, legal cannabis popularity has skyrocketed among voters young and old, Republican and Democrat. And in fact, for the first time in history, 2017 saw the majority of Republican voters nationwide favoring full legalization instead of prohibition, and that's according to a Fox News poll. Whether you love or hate cannabis personally, politically, or religiously, one thing is quite clear: the cat's out of the bag, and it's not going back in. We can either regulate it well and professionally, or we can fail at this experiment and let government and corruption run away with this. All the while, Canada has already legalized. Mexico is planning to legalize within this year. Germany, Israel, many other countries around the world, while America stands on the sidelines and tramples our personal freedoms and our 10th Amendment rights. How does America do this well in response to the majority demanding legalization? I say in almost every way, look to Colorado. We've figured this out. I cannot emphasize all of this enough. We hear things in these statistics, we hear things in these outrageous statements about what has happened to Colorado since legalization. And what we need to do is we need to be willing to move past what's put out in a fundraising email that's designed to scare and raise money or put it up on a screen to fit our agenda. With that, I look forward to a vibrant and intellectually honest conversation and discussion about truth, liberty, and the American dream.
Dan, thank you. Jeff.
Colorado was sold on the premise that legalizing recreational marijuana would reduce crime in the black market. Cartels would be dismantled. We would reduce use by youth. We'd reduce drugged driving. We'd reduce the opioid crisis. We'd provide massive tax dollars for education, and it would promote social justice. Bottom line, legalizing recreational marijuana was going to solve all of our problems here in Colorado. 5 years later, not a single promise by the marijuana industry came true. Marijuana has been a disaster for Colorado by nearly every metric. Youth use. Colorado currently holds the top ranking for first-time marijuana use among youth, representing a 65% increase in the years since legalization. In Douglas County, youth busted for marijuana in high school has gone up 149% since legalization. They don't even have recreational marijuana shops in Douglas County. Nearly half the newborn babies tested in Pueblo tested positive for marijuana in their system. Marijuana was supposed to be the alternative to opioids, and therefore opioid use was supposed to go down. Opioid overdose deaths in Colorado increased from 2000 to 2015. In 2016 alone, heroin deaths went up 23%. Neonatal addiction to opioids went up 91% in 2016 alone. Right now, drug overdose is the single largest killer of pregnant moms in Colorado. How about car accidents? The number of drivers who tested positive for marijuana use in fatal crashes has jumped 145% since marijuana legalization. How about crime in Colorado? Marijuana legalization was supposed to get rid of the black market. It has done the exact opposite. Statistics show that arrests for the production of black market pot has increased by 380% from 2014 to 2016. Felony marijuana cases have risen by 55% in Colorado. How about tax dollars? We were promised that we were going to get a tremendous amount of tax dollars. Well, we have received about $223 million in fiscal year 2017 from tax revenue. But on a $13 billion budget, that's 1.61% of total tax revenue for the state of Colorado. We often hear about how much marijuana is going to bring to our schools. Similarly, marijuana has brought only about 1.6% of the total revenue for the operations of our schools here in Colorado. $40 million of marijuana tax is supposed to go towards schools to help develop the schools with construction projects. Well, a statewide facility assessment determined a need of nearly $18 billion in capital construction projects through 2018. That means marijuana tax revenue provides about 0.2% of the necessary capital for school construction projects. If you ask any teacher in Colorado if they would rather have less kids on pot or an additional 0.2% for school construction, they're going to want less kids on pot every single time. Bottom line, since legalization, we have more kids on pot, more cartel and black market activity, more marijuana-related traffic fatalities, higher health care costs, more employees using marijuana affecting businesses, more African-American and Hispanic youth being arrested for marijuana. Marijuana commercialization is a failed experiment in Colorado by every single metric. Marijuana legalization was sold to Colorado voters to keep people out of jail for minor possession. It was sold as decriminalization. What it created was the commercialization of a massive new drug. And businesses have enormous financial incentives to hook as many people as they can on this drug. But who is left cleaning up this mess? Colorado taxpayers.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll now begin the question and answer period. Again, 2-minute answers, and you can rebut. Anyone in the state of Colorado that travels anywhere outside of the state of Colorado knows what we all typically will hear. Oh, how's that marijuana thing going? What does this do? What has this done the last 5 years to the image of Colorado? Point blank.
Would you like to start?
Sure.
Go for it.
Thank you. So, honestly, as a conservative, I'd love to be at CPAC, but I'm more honored to be here. I think what we're hearing from most of the people who are interested in this is, when can I have that in my state? Whether it be for medical reasons or whether it just be for freedom of choice. So, typically people talk about Colorado as wonderful, beautiful, sunshine, outdoor recreation, and oh, by the way, you have more freedoms than we do in Ohio or West Virginia. And that's not just cannabis. That's also in firearms. That's also in education choice. That's also in many other areas, especially Tabor. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights is something that doesn't exist in most other states. So what I hear from folks is, wow, it's really a couple of different shades of purple when I look at Colorado, because some years it's a little more blue, some years it's a little more red. And unfortunately for the narrative, it's not that the state of Colorado is just washed in cannabis. It's that we're washed in freedom and liberty. And isn't that fantastic that what you've done is decide to exercise the right to see what happens with the 10th Amendment. And as conservatives, states' rights are not something that we can cherry pick. States' rights is something that was granted to us by the Constitution and the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, and every single conservative should be absolutely steadfast in their protection and demand that states' rights be protected, instead of trampling on it and asking for the federal government to step in and bring us more government. It's absolutely amazing to me, looking at your website, in regards to business, fiscal responsibility, free trade, all of these other things, that what we want is we want the federal government to come in and overregulate a constitutionally protected business. I'm sure that's my time.
And that's time, yeah. Again, to the question of the image of Colorado.
We've got a major problem in Colorado. If you go down to the 16th Street Mall, the amount of crime that they're having down there, the mayor is trying to figure out what to do with the amount of drugs that are taking place down there on 16th Street Mall. And we've developed this brand that Colorado used to be this great place for recreation, where you'd come and go skiing and go whitewater rafting, and the tourism industry was great. We now have a drug tourism industry where people are coming to Colorado to get stoned, to do drugs. It's terrible for our state. And we've lost that great reputation as a state that had that wonderful opportunity to go out and enjoy the great outdoors and enjoy that type of lifestyle. Instead, we've got major problems in the city of Denver. They're now to the point where they're trying to ban smoking, period, on the 16th Street Mall, which is the major mall that runs right through the city of Denver, because it's so bad out there. And any tourist that's going to drive through I-25 right through the middle of the town is going to smell all the marijuana from the marijuana factories that are down there, the marijuana plants. It's a terrible smell for our state. It's been a terrible all around.
Do we get a rebuttal on anything?
Well, you were laughing, so we want to take the rest of his time.
Absolutely. Odor mitigation is absolutely one of the regulations the cannabis businesses have, and every municipality has the ability to come in and fine, shut down, or create some sort of punitive action for the smell of marijuana. I can't imagine anybody driving through I-25 and actually smelling cannabis, based on the tens of thousands of dollars that I have spent just on charcoal filters at my facility. And I look out at my colleagues and I know they've done the same thing. And I think that the tourism industry would disagree with my opponent on how they feel about tourism. Additionally, I think that it's also, to say that people are moving here for cannabis is disregarding all of the corporations, including Amazon, that is considering Colorado for executive relocation, and that's simply because of our recreational lifestyle here in Colorado. Our mountains, our beautiful weather, all the things that make Colorado so attractive to come to and have been since the 1970s.
I will say I've never smelled marijuana on I-25, but if you go down Broadway, different story. For those of you that have no idea where Broadway is, trust me. Next question. We have a couple of children in the audience. I have two boys who are teenagers in high school. I'm wondering what kind of message has this sent to young people, not only in the state of Colorado, but in other states that have legalized marijuana. What message does this send to someone who is not 18 and has been tempted or has experimented already? And we'll start with Jeff.
Yeah. So in my opening statement, I listed all the statistical evidence that says that youth use has gone up in Colorado, and it's a huge problem here. But one of the most shocking statistics that we run into is the fact that over 80% of teenagers in Colorado do not think that smoking marijuana is harmful. They don't find any problem with it. They don't think there's any problem with it. And I also listed the fact that down in Pueblo, half the babies tested are being tested positive for THC in their bodies. They went down to Pueblo and they asked the moms, why do you have THC in your bodies? Why are you smoking marijuana while you're pregnant? Their answer, well, it's just medicine. What could be wrong with it? There's nothing wrong with marijuana. So my question for the marijuana industry is marijuana harmful for teenagers? Or how about children in utero? Is marijuana harmful for them?
Is it my turn?
Go ahead.
Certainly. So I don't think when we talk about the difference between medical and recreational that we can have that conversation about children, because there's certainly epileptic children and many other children with cancer who are currently utilizing cannabis to save their life. Recreationally, it's not for kids. It's not 18, by the way, Stefan. It's 21. And there is absolutely no desire on the part of the marketplace for anybody who's under the age of 21 to get their hands on these products. We put them in child-resistant packaging. We are restricted in our labeling from anything that might be attractive to children. We're restricted in our marketing. We do not advertise. My company, now there are definitely some dispensaries that do some advertising within the law. My company doesn't do any advertising. We have some social media sites that just say who we are and what we do. This is a product, the National Confectioners Association, which is built out of all of the candy companies globally, which are some of the largest corporations in the entire world, have all of the data that says what categories of confections are attractive to what demographics. Candy is not attractive to children. Candy is attractive to people over the age of 25, primarily, and you can look it up, and we've actually got the stats on my website, americanico.com. I didn't pay for those stats, unlike my opponent's stats who actually paid for most of those stats, which are entirely fake news. And additionally to that, the number of babies that you're talking about in Pueblo were tested babies, but he presents that as if half of the babies that are born in Pueblo are somehow on cannabis. I'd love for Jeff to start actually giving you the numbers, because it's very easy to go from, say, a number like 3 to 9 and say that that's a 300% increase. In Colorado, emergency room visits are less than 400 for cannabis across the state. In Colorado, for alcohol-related injuries, alcohol-related incidents, it's 7,000.
That's tough.
One's microscopic, one's an epidemic, and the epidemic is alcohol.
Can I ask a question? Why don't you want people under the age of 21 to utilize recreational marijuana?
Same reason that other industry into our own businesses in order to be compliant with the law, and we have more scrutiny than casinos and the people who house dynamite for avalanche mitigation. I have more restrictions on how I store cannabis than those folks who do avalanche mitigation do on dynamite. Let's talk realities.
That's time.
Certainly.
Okay, let's get to a question for especially our audience outside of the state of Colorado. Many states have thought about this. Many states have tried it. They've been successful. Others have failed. We've seen it fail in Colorado before. Is this just a matter of time before, and this would be your fear, Jeff, and your wish perhaps, that it is legal in most, if not all, 50 states? Jeff.
So when you look at alcohol and tobacco, those are the big two drugs. And then the question we have today is whether or not marijuana should become the third great American drug to be legalized. If you look at alcohol and tobacco, the cost to society for both of those outweigh any economic benefits you're going to get. So this idea that somehow marijuana is going to provide this great economic benefit to America is false. It's not actually going to happen. This will cost society more than any benefit that we're going to get out of it. Right now, tobacco costs hundreds of millions of dollars in health care. Same with alcohol. Now we want to legalize a third American drug. All right? So that's the problem. That's the great concern I have about recreational marijuana. If you look at the lifespan of tobacco, okay, in the 1800s, you didn't have massive amounts of people dying of lung cancer. Why? Because if you wanted to smoke tobacco, you had to grow your own tobacco, you had to dry your own tobacco, you had to roll your own tobacco, you had to smoke your own tobacco. If it wasn't until the 1920s when cigarette companies started putting them in packs of 20s, lacing them with nicotine and selling them at the gas station, that you had this massive health epidemic that hit America. And it took 90 years for us to wake up to what the cigarette companies were doing. They knew that cigarettes was a nicotine delivery device. They were making hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was costing taxpayers even more than that. All right? What we're trying to stop when it comes to marijuana is that exact same thing. The marijuana industry is no different than Big Tobacco 2.0. They will make a lot of money, but us as taxpayers will pay the price for this. It is a bad deal for America. We shouldn't legalize it, and if we do, it's going to take decades for us to feel the consequence of this.
Thank you.
Fake news. So that is absolutely the pitch that's being proposed to folks, is that we're somehow Big Tobacco. This is a family-run business. My wife right here in the front works for me. My business partner had all three of his brothers working for us. This is a common thing that happens in the cannabis industry, is that these are family-run, and the extended employees are also families. You know, this is their favorite thing to say is suit-wearing marijuana millionaires. I haven't worn a suit in 2 years. I actually had to go buy a shirt for this event. So, you know, I think what we're really talking about here is the difference in the perspective of the conservative voter, the conservative legislator, the conservative policymaker, of overregulating based out of fear or overregulating based out of need, right? So I think what we need to consider is that there are 50,000 jobs directly related to the marijuana industry created just here in the state of Colorado. All 50,000 of those people have had their criminal backgrounds checked. They all wear an occupational license. But then let's talk about the tens of thousands of businesses who I have to do business with here in the state of Colorado because my bank will not allow me to make a payment out of the state because of federal regulations. So my packaging comes from Colorado packaging companies. My attorneys are all Colorado attorneys. Every single thing that we do has to be with a Colorado company. So we're probably talking about over 100,000 people who are directly benefiting financially, economically, because of the legalization of this. And back to your original question, it can't happen soon enough. The national legalization of cannabis, it's time. 93% of American voters agree with medical marijuana, and 63% agree with complete and full legalization. Basically, any politicians at CPAC, cannabis is more popular than you are.
Can I respond?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. So we often get into this bifurcation debate where you either have to fully commercialize it or you have to fully regulate it and provide prohibition on it. There are options out there that don't follow the Colorado model, and that's what's really important. States like Vermont have done this, where if you want to grow a plant, if you want to have a joint in your pocket, you're not going to go to jail for it. But do we want to incentivize multi-million-dollar companies to go out there and try to hook as many people as they can on this drug? No. So we can find middle ground here that allows for, FDA approval of CBDs that don't require the full commercialization and drive to try to hook as many people on this drug as possible.
So the Centennial Institute loves the FDA. That's news to me. I was unaware you love government agencies so much. So as far as I'm concerned, the complaint about cannabis in your neighbor's backyard and the complaint about commercialization is you don't know which side you want. Right? And what you truly want is you want to have commercial businesses that have skin in the game, that have attorneys, you say multi-million-dollar companies. It's not uncommon for any category of any business to be multi-million. My company, I'll just be very full disclosure, we do about $7 million of business a year. I have a $2 million payroll, then don't even ask me how much I pay for my attorneys, compliance officers, et cetera. I mean, we are barely running in the black, and this is not what everybody who has been reading this fake news fully believes.
We're going to move on because we're running out of time. We are on the campus of Colorado Christian University. Would God approve of marijuana legalization? Jeff?
To me first. So we often get this idea that, I hear this debate all the time, God created this plant, all plants are good. In Genesis it says all plants are good, therefore we should embrace this plant. If that's your theology, you have a real hard time with hemlock and those types of plants, right? So not every single plant out there is great for consumption. I have no problem with finding medical components within marijuana that can help people. I have no problem with that. And most conservatives have no problem with that. Okay? But right now, marijuana is about THC delivery. Okay? What he hasn't talked about is that most of the marijuana that people smoked, even marijuana that I smoked when I was in high school, was 7-8% THC. They're now creating 99% pure THC marijuana edibles, those types of things, and things that you can take that have high potency pot. Okay, there's no study out there as to the impact of this. We've had people in Colorado that are busted driving 22 times the legal limit on marijuana. How do you get 22 times the legal limit into your body? Well, it's this high potency pot. It's dabbing. It's and that's what you're not hearing outside of Colorado. And the amount of people that have moved from just, we're going to smoke a joint every once in a while, to daily smoking high-potency pot because it's about THC delivery, just like the tobacco companies were about nicotine delivery. That's what you're getting in Colorado. And I don't think God would want that at all. Being at Colorado Christian University, we know it affects your mind. We know we're called to be sober-minded, it says in Ephesians. The idea that we're getting into this high-potency pot that's ruining people's lives is not good at all and should be condemned outright.
To directly answer your question, God is love. Jesus died for our sins. My father was he retired as the minister for the First American Baptist Church in Davenport, Iowa, has hosted presidential candidates because they all love going to Iowa. We've never had this conversation. This is a very difficult conversation for he and I to have. We avoid it. I think that quoting Genesis and quoting other scripture is actually marginalizing the conversation. I think what God has done is he has allowed us to create certain aspects of our own lives to legislate for ourselves. There are certain activities that, of course, God doesn't approve of, and those are outlined in the Bible. And we certainly don't have time to deal with that today, but I would like to discuss a couple of things. First of all, the
science 30 seconds.
Science was not out. There's no possible way that Mr. Hunt's marijuana, that he could definitively say it was 7 or 8%. This was only invented after legalization, determining the potency of marijuana. Also, 99% would be a miracle for people who are involved in the marijuana business. We're really doing well if we could do 86% purity. But what you need to understand, 86% purity, if that THC was 14%, 18%, 22% when it started as a plant prior to making it an oil, it's still that potent. All it is pure. We have removed different molecules of it. It's all science. We could have a debate for hours. There's a lab professional out in the audience who could straighten my science out. Thank you.
It's time for closing remarks. 2 minutes. If you'd like to begin, we'll let the...
I started. You want me to...
Well, you know, I think he'd want to be a good host.
Perfect.
So.
Thank you very much. Closing thoughts. Here's what cannabis has really meant for Colorado. $2 billion in sales, $300 million in state taxes, an additional $200 million in local municipal taxes. Ask Manitou Springs what they're doing with their money. And jobs, I've already talked about the number of jobs that have been created directly. Teen use is actually down. This is why I'm talking about fake news. So when you go to my website, americanacode.com, I'll actually have the statistics that come from the National Institute of Health, from the state of Colorado, not from some of these bought and paid for studies that you guys have heard about. And what you'll see is the Centennial Institute shows a blip up, mine shows a blip down. Let's be right in the middle and just admit that almost nothing has changed. There are certain instances where people have had certain experiences that are isolated, and that's called anecdotal. So in the overall number of what's happened, almost nothing has changed except an increase in tourism, increase in jobs, an increase in economics, and an increase in our liberties. Legalizing cannabis has simply been the greatest political decision that the citizens of the state of Colorado have ever made in the 21st century. And they were actually asked in the city of Pueblo whether or not they regretted that decision, and they beat it in double digits. In double digits, they defeated the measure to repeal recreational marijuana. That's important to anybody who follows politics to understand what the will of the people truly are. We've created an economic prosperity, careers, safety measures to protect consumers by demanding safe processes in the workplace and products. That's what's great about commercialization. And we've created awareness of this product for parents. I have 2 children. My son was 13 years old when Amendment 64 passed, so I dealt with what it's like to have a teenager when you're involved in cannabis and when the state has done with cannabis.
That's time.
So thank you very much, and let's not forget that 93% of Americans support medical marijuana.
Great. At the Conservative Political Action Conference, we are conservatives, and we have laid the foundation through Edmund Burke, Russell Kirk, and what they talked about as a conservative worldview was the importance of liberty, order, and justice. When my friend here talks about liberty, what he really means is license. If you look to the founders and the original intent of liberty, it was an ordered liberty, guided by natural law. What we have seen here in Colorado is a breakdown of order. Yeah, we may pursue liberty in one sense, but it's harming our communities. And I just laid out all the different ways that it's harmed our communities. Russell Kirk and Edmund Burke would have never appreciated or approved of this because liberty cannot break down order. You need liberty, order, and justice all working at the same time for a healthy community. That's what's really important. If we were really working on the drug issue in Colorado, why are we debating right now in the city of Denver in building a publicly funded needle injection site? All right? We're not going on the right direction in drugs. We're going the exact wrong direction. And what you've seen in the opioid industry is exactly what we're trying to prevent in the marijuana industry. You had a reckless industry with little regulation that was primarily motivated by profit. And you know, marijuana is not nearly as addictive as opioids. I'll totally grant you that. but it was unregulated, and they had a financial incentive to hook as many people as they can. 60 Minutes did a big special on this just recently, okay? That's what we're trying to prevent in Colorado. We're trying to fight for healthy families, not kids on drug addiction. We're trying to fight for true freedom within the context of order. So that's what we're fighting for. That's why we cannot legalize recreational marijuana nationally. It will break apart families and harm our communities ultimately.
Gentlemen, thank you, and thank you for participating. Big round of applause for our panelists today. I want to thank Colorado Christian University for hosting today. I'm Stephen Tubbs with 710 KNUS in Denver. Enjoy the rest of CPAC, and let's make America great again.